Yes, trade deadline Tuesday. Lots of trades. I think this has to be the best trade deadline of my lifetime. I don't know what you guys think, but wow, a
Yeah,
lot came at us and a lot in a very short amount of time. So let's get started. First one, our we actually didn't bring it up because we didn't do a show yesterday. Roquan Smith was traded from the Chicago Bears to the Baltimore Ravens. That trade involved a second round pick. So now Roquan Smith gets to try to work out his contract negotiations with a different franchise. So good for him, good for the Bears, good for the Ravens. I think. I mean, we'll find out.
yeah.
T.J. Hockenson. This is kind of big. T.J. Hockenson to our purple, the Minnesota Vikings acquired T.J. Hockenson to fill the void of Irv Smith Jr., who's actually going to miss the next 8 to 10 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So that sucks for Irv, but we got a really good tight end now. I mean, he's under contract for next year too. So this works out pretty good for us.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
love it. I thought at first the Vikings gave up all those picks, and now I know that they got a couple back. This was domination in a trade standpoint. The Vikings absolutely won this trade.
Basically, based off the like what they actually gave up in the trade. So they gave up a second and a third, and then they got a couple fourths back in exchange. So basically, the third and the two fourths kind of cancel each other out, in my opinion. So basically, they valued T.J. Hockenson as second round pick, and let's be honest. I mean, in years past, even there hasn't even been that good of a tight end sitting there in the second round. So I think that's a really big move, and they had somebody who's hopefully going to bolster this offense a little bit more and march on forward towards winning the North.
Yeah, really good trade. Lions definitely got screwed over here, but it actually what I thought was gonna happen was I didn't even think they were gonna trade for anyone. I thought they were gonna sign OBJ, but obviously that's not the case.
Yeah, that's probably out the window at this point now.
Yeah, and perfect timing because Irv Smith just got injured. I
Yeah,
don't know what his injury was, but
I don't know if this was to do with the Irv Smith injury. It had to be right because it pretty much came out at the exact same time that he was going to miss 8 to 10 weeks.
it
So
would make sense.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if this trade gets done if they don't find that out, but
Right,
either way, I mean, he's an upgrade all around the board. So good for them.
definitely.
I'm curious to see what they would have done if this trade doesn't happen, because Jerry Jeudy was viewed as the same relatively, like a second and fifth.
Right.
I know they might not have wanted him that bad, but we know there were talks of them getting another wide receiver that they probably didn't need, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the move would have been Cooks, Brandon Cooks. That is, I I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't do anything at all, but I think there would still have been some sort of move. But either way, it's a pass catcher, red zone threat. I'm all for this.
I don't think we're gonna get Brandon Cooks over to Minnesota. That didn't really make any sense, especially what Houston was asking for. I don't think he was worth that at all.
He had an interesting contract structure too, so it would have been kind of hard with the accounting to make it work. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean this seems like the best move. I mean, they're only on the hook for his bonus, I believe it is, which is like $500,000. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Sticking in the north, we go to Chicago, and Chase Claypool was acquired by the Chicago Bears. Pittsburgh Steelers selling off Claypool after George Pickens is kind of broke out for them. Obviously, they still got Washington there and Fryer Muth, but I think this was a good move for the Bears to get some receiver help. I don't know how Claypool necessarily is behind the scenes. I've heard some things about him,
Mm-hmm.
but don't necessarily want to speculate on the whole thing.
this trade Man, arguably you traded for the third best receiver in that team, and you couldn't even you couldn't flip the pick that you just got from the Ravens.
Yeah.
You just gave them a pick inside the top 40, probably 35.
I don't know. Bears front office is kind of questionable. I think we can all agree on that. But hey,
least they're getting
at the end of the
something.
day, Justin Fields has some help now.
I actually heard this afternoon when I was on my way home from work that the Packers were actually in on it too.
Yeah,
So
they offered the same amount, but
Who weren't they interested in?
they viewed the Bears to have a better pick. I would too, honestly, and I would have taken the Bears deal.
after this trade, though, it's always possible. I don't think it's going to happen. That Packers pick could actually become more valuable than the Bears pick, but you
Yeah.
know,
Did you
the
guys think?
Bears
Did you
still
guys
going to
think
bear down.
Green Bay would trade for a wide receiver?
I didn't think there was a chance at all. I thought they
I
were just
didn't
going to
Really?
stick with it.
There really
mean-
wasn't a doubt in my mind.
If they were 5-3, I'd say yeah, they should trade for a receiver, but they're not. They're 3-5. I think this was the best thing for them to do for their future. Just kind of realize that you're not going to win the North. You maybe get into the playoffs as a wild card, but sorry, I just can't help but laughing thinking about this whole Aaron Rodgers thing that's just come crashing down.
Indeed.
And feels so good as a Vikings fan to finally say this. I mean, after 30 years of dynamic quarterback play, we might be running the North now. So, I mean, things could always come crashing down here too. But for right now, we got a 3.5 game lead.
All right, I want to bring a new segment in here. We're going to do Who Has More. So we're going to pick two players, and we're going to bring up stat, and I want you guys to guess who has more. So we're going to go receptions, Curtis Samuel, and A.J. Brown. Who has more?
It seems kind of tricky.
Yeah. No. I think it's Curtis Samuel, and I think it's because there's only two good receivers on the team. Well, other than Jahan Dotson, but I think Curtis Samuel knows, or he can get open. He's a good route runner. And I think, yeah, it's probably going to be him.
I know AJ Brown definitely has the yards on him. At least I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna say AJ Brown on this.
All right.
Let me reinstate what I was saying. I agree with Connor. AJ Brown definitely has more yards, but he's more of a vertical, deeper threat where Curtis Samuel can run the routes. And let's be honest, Washington doesn't have that heavy of an offense and or that powerful of an offense, so they really need a dink and dunk, kind of like the Raiders.
All right, so Connor's going A.J. Brown, Brandon's going Curtis Samuel.
Yep.
Right.
Curtis Samuel has 42 receptions. A.J. Brown has 39. Very close.
I wouldn't have even thought that Curtis Samuel would have been in the same neighborhood as AJ Brown, honestly.
Mm-mm.
William Jackson III finally works his way out of the commie land in Washington, D.C. He's now a Pittsburgh Steeler. I love this move for the Steelers. If I remember right, Riley, I don't know if you have the terms of the trade pulled up, but I don't think they had to give up much for him. Granted, he has a little bit higher of a salary, I believe. But Pittsburgh, I mean, let's be honest, coming into the season, I totally trashed their defensive backs for the way that they structured their roster. They didn't have much, but now they actually got a guy who's actually pretty solid in William Jackson III. So I like this move for Pittsburgh, and well, let's just be honest, Washington, this is really only a salary dump for them. They don't get much back. And up next, we have Bradley Chubb going to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for a first-round pick. And Chase Edmonds, I believe a fifth was also given to the Dolphins. So the Broncos, I mean, desperately needing help in their running back room. Obviously, the highlight of the trade is Bradley Chubb, but I think beyond this year, this is kind of a desperate grasp for Denver to try to get themselves back into the top 31 picks of the draft. I mean, this is insane.
Go ahead. Oh my gosh.
So inevitably, this first round pick will probably be spent on Bradley Chubb's replacement, which probably won't be nearly as good as Bradley Chubb right away. The only thing is he'll be cheaper. But I mean, at least Chase Edmonds gets a place in Denver where he'll inevitably get a lot more load than he did in Miami.
What were your thoughts on Bradley Chubb?
Like just
as
overall,
a player, solidly. Like, what tier would you rank him at? Who could you compare him as?
Maybe like a Ryan Kerrigan in terms of like his production.
And okay, Ryan Kerrigan is pretty solid, but he never, I'd say, reached the point where like, oh, this guy is like Hall of Famer material, or like, we need to have this guy.
He's not Von Miller.
Right. I mean, he's still solid, but like, really, first round pick?
I think it's kind of a twofold item here. So, number one, Denver's desperate to try to get a first round pick back after they realize that, let's just be honest, the Russell Wilson trade's kind of a disaster at this point, or at least it has been. And for Miami, this is what I really don't understand. Okay, so Miami makes this trade, and I think it's because they beat the Bills back in week 3. I think that's when they played. So now they think, oh, we're as good as the Bills. We can go to the Super Bowl. I don't think there's a shot in the world that Miami gets anywhere close to the Super Bowl, because they're probably not even going to win their division. So not only are they not going to win their division, they're going to have to go play 3 tough games on the road to get there. It just doesn't make much sense. Now, if they really wanted him, they could have went and got him in free agency. But, it just doesn't make much sense at this point. I think next year would have been better.
Yeah, I definitely think they overpaid for him. I don't know what the Dolphins were thinking. They must think like, this is our year. Like, we have stack receiving core, stack offense. We just need to add a couple more pieces to the defense and we'll be good.
I mean, I guess if you look at their salary cap situation, next year they're not going to have much wiggle room. Now, they can maybe restructure some things here and there, but they went out and got an expensive offensive lineman this offseason in Teron Armstead. Now they're going to have to pay Bradley Chubb at some point too, because I believe his contract is up. Is it up after this season? But, I mean, they're going to have to make room for that contract, because I'm assuming they're going to try to extend him. I mean, typically you don't just trade a first-round pick and then let the guy walk in free agency the following offseason.
As of now, the Dolphins would be playing in Kansas City.
See, I don't like that. I don't like their chances at all there. I mean, it's probably going to be cold in Kansas City come January, but it's a warm weather team. I think that Kansas City has way more firepower than Miami does. I mean, you can maybe argue that Kansas City has more firepower offensively than the Bills. I think the Bills have a better defense, but it seems like no matter which side of the ball you choose, Miami wouldn't really match up all that well against either Buffalo or Kansas City in a winner-take-all playoff game.
Trade that I really like for both sides. I honestly like it more Jacksonville's way.
Yeah, it'll get them some wide receiver help next year for Trevor Lawrence. The thing that kind of bothers me, though, is I hope that they're not really looking at this as, great, now the wide receiver core is fixed for next year. We got every single thing that Trevor Lawrence ever could need, besides, somebody better than Cam Robinson. But that kind of scares me if I'm a Jaguars fan. And the fact that they gave up a future second-round pick, it almost feels like they're adding to their roster just to kind of do it. And I don't think that they have a number one on their team right now. I think they should have waited until the draft to get a number one. I would have rather Calvin Ridley be added to the Jaguars and then them get an additional piece, but I just fear that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, that's one major problem in that offense. They do not have a number one wide receiver, and no one that's ever had a particular role in that position either. I mean, you could argue maybe Christian Kirk split the field a little bit last year or the past couple of seasons, but he's never really been that number one guy.
I
But
think they'll be fine because this is building for next year. He won't come back this year. So
isn't
they'll share the field next year with Kirk. I think they'll be really good together as a duo.
Do you think Ridley's number one receiver caliber though?
Yeah.
was
I mean,
he
we haven't seen him in a while, so we kind of forgot how good he was.
was
Right.
he the number one guy last year in Atlanta?
Yeah.
I feel like he had to have been. Well, Kyle Pitts had a lot of yards, but I mean, this will be an interesting experiment to see. Maybe they're thinking we get this guy now, he's established, then we can focus maybe on the interior of our defensive line or offensive line next offseason instead.
I think that's what they wanted to do because they don't really have good idea of drafting a wide receiver, nor do they really ever do it.
Can't really think of the last guy that they drafted in the first round with the intent of being their number one receiver. Well, I guess maybe Justin Blackmon, but that was like 10 years ago.
Right.
I mean, last year they brought in former first-round pick Laquan Treadwell, and I believe he was just picked up by the Seahawks today.
Oh, yeah, that was the big move of the day. Former first-round pick Laquan Treadwell is now Seahawks practice squad member. To be honest, I was waiting on his destination all offseason. Oh, honestly, I forgot he was even in the league, and that's probably a good thing for me to forget. Let's move on before I start going off about Treadwell.
It's all right.
Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson has now moved to the Dolphins, so I guess he's probably going to be the Chase Edmonds replacement.
Uh-huh.
We talked last week about how the 49ers running back room was kind of crowded. This makes it a little less crowded, makes the McCaffrey trade seem a little bit better. I don't know what you guys think, but I think that he'll actually be able to have a similar role in Miami to what he had in San Francisco.
Yeah. I don't think he'll take over the number one role. I think it'll just you'll have a pretty decent duo in a passing team,
which is good.
Yeah.
I mean, they need that. Nyheim, Hines, going to the Bills. I don't know that this was the big thing for the Bills to do after you heard all the talks about Alvin Kamara maybe going there, and then Christian McCaffrey maybe going there. Heard some other talk about other running backs, maybe little pieces here and there, but you go from those two big names, Pro Bowlers and McCaffrey and Kamara, and then, hey, we got Nyheim Hines. But Brandin, you're the Colts fan. I think you can speak to this a little bit more. I think Nyheim Hines is their pass catcher now.
Yeah, I don't really understand. Like, I can understand why the Bills want him. I mean, obviously, everyone, or basically the entire world, has them going to the Super Bowl this year, and realistically, they need all the help they can get. And Nyheim Hines, he can get it done. I mean, he wasn't the starting running back, obviously because of Jonathan Taylor, but he can definitely do it all. He can go in the slot. He can play in the backfield as a starting running back. I mean, he can do backflips. He's a gymnastics man. But overall, I think he's the perfect fit for the Bills team. I just don't know, like, the purpose of this trade in the Colts' eyes, at least.
To me, it almost kind of feels like the Bills walked into the store looking for their big screen TV, right? Their Christian McCaffrey, their Alvin Kamara. And on their way over to go to look at the big screen TVs, they got distracted by the $5 DVD bins. And in that $5 DVD bin, they pulled out a Nyheim Hines, and they were like, "This is good enough for me. Let's go home." So, I mean,
Can you relate?
um,
Because I can.
maybe a little, but I mean, this. I don't know how this really fits into the Bills' plans. Seems like their running back room now is just kind of crowded, and they didn't crowd it with really better players. It kind of feels like they just got more of the same player.
Mm-hmm.
And now, fired offensive coordinator today, Indianapolis Colts. Brandin, I know you had talked about how you didn't really appreciate the play calling of the
Mm-hmm.
Colts, so maybe this helps them a little bit more. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
does Frank Reich call plays, or was the offensive coordinator
I
play
think he
caller?
makes. I think he makes final decisions. I know this is what most coaches do. Most head coaches. I know there's a lot of coaches that might just stand there and let the defensive coordinators do their jobs, but they might be there on the headset listening and making sure that they don't mess anything up. You know, like a final, like your final draft or whatever. But maybe because a lot of heat has been on Frank Reich after this week about the play calling, and personally, after starting Sam Ellinger, which didn't play bad, but didn't play the best because, I mean, he didn't really get as many shots as one would think as a starting quarterback in the NFL, but it was his first starting game. So probably in their game plan wasn't to overwhelm him and throw as many balls as he can, like they have been with Matt Ryan, throwing it basically over 45 times a game. I mean, he number 4 in the league in passing yards, and he's turned the ball over so many times. Probably because he's so overwhelmed throwing the ball, and the defense already can predict what's going to happen. But I don't know. Maybe this was a good move for them. I don't know. Let's see. We'll see what happens within the next upcoming weeks.
So, a couple of bigger names that were not traded. I think the one kind of makes sense. And Jeudy, he's sticking around in Denver. And then so is Brandin Cooks down in Houston. I think the deal is the asking price for Cooks was just too high. Maybe that's the case with Jeudy a little bit. Or, other teams saw maybe more long-term options with the guys that they got. But it just kind of feels weird to me that the Broncos are trying to sell off pieces after they just traded 3 first-round picks for Russell Wilson.
Mm.
I mean, they basically made a move that says we are this one player away from the Super Bowl. And I feel like that's basically just this year is their window. And, because now next year they don't have any picks. I mean, you can't build around the quarterback that you just signed for a bunch of money long term.
Right.
If you don't have the draft capital to build around him. But
right.
None of the Broncos moves have really made sense up to this point. I mean, we already talked about the Bradley Chubb and how it just doesn't feel like they're trying to win now. They've done a complete 180 of where they were headed back in March and April.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Giants really should have traded for him, Jeudy.
Yeah.
I thought that was a perfect fit.
Maybe, but how much were they going to use him? I mean, isn't the reason KT went to the Chiefs because he didn't get any touches?
It's more of like scheme fits and everything.
Yeah.
So if I don't know, maybe the Giants didn't view him as a scheme fit, but like if you got a guy that kind of fits into what you're going to do, I guess. I mean, it's not that the Giants are disinterested in wide receivers because they clearly need some. I mean, they don't really have anybody right now to catch passes, but they're turning to their tight ends a lot more. But yeah, Jeudy trade would have made sense there. Personally, to speak on the Giants right now, I think I kind of brought this up. I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but it kind of looks like the Giants are sticking to their plan of coming into the year of okay, we don't necessarily see ourselves as front runners this year, so we're just going to stick with the plan. And even though we're 6-2 right now, maybe we've overachieved a little bit, maybe we've gotten lucky a little bit, but I can respect that from a team building perspective of them not going all in right now. I mean, especially in that division they're in. They're in third place. But it's something to watch for. I mean, I'm assuming that they're going to push more chips into the bin coming this next offseason, trying to bolster that wide receiver core a little bit and get some more weapons. Everybody knows the Raiders got shut out by the New Orleans Saints on Sunday, and it wasn't until Jared Stidham got into the game that they actually crossed midfield, and that was like with 3 minutes left in the game. So Braden, I know you had posed, or you kind of said to me, you were wondering how much I think that Derek Carr is the problem. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not so much thinking that he's the problem. I think he's not the solution, though. So my question to both of you guys, should the Raiders be looking to move on from Derek Carr in the next couple years by maybe drafting his replacement this next April?
Yes.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
I think you could get away with it too, if you don't have to strip the whole thing down that much.
Right.
I mean, you just traded for Devontae. You don't want to either.
Well, and who's to say that they even need to get a first round pick? I mean, unless the wheels completely fall off, I don't think they're going to be picking in the top 5, which is probably where they need to be picking in order to get that next guy. But they could wait until the second round. And the thing is if they wait to do in the second round, they can probably draft an offensive lineman to go and protect the blind side of that future quarterback. Well, I guess they got somebody to protect the blind side, but they need guards, they need tackles. I mean, they really only have 2 out of the 5 pieces that they need for a solid offensive line. I believe they just got Dylan Parham and Colton Miller. I mean, that's pretty much all they got to put around a quarterback. Obviously, we know that Alex Leatherwood didn't work out the way that he was supposed to. They tried him at tackle, which is where he was drafted to play. And then they tried him at guard, and he was bad at both of those positions. So it's just weird now that the Raiders may be playing without Derek Carr in the next couple of years. And I think it is time for them to move on and find someone else.
What do you think the process is going to be like? Because I can see this going 100 different ways. So that's over exaggerated because there's only a few ways you can go about it. But I could see them possibly trading him after the season's done. To, let's say, the Texans, where David Carr used to play. Or maybe, I don't know. I could see him going. Honestly, I don't even know.
My personal opinion is
maybe the Lions.
Maybe. My personal opinion is keep him in Las Vegas for this next year. Draft a quarterback. I'm going to say draft one in the second round because Derek Carr himself was taken in the second round. You don't necessarily need to get a first-round guy for him to last 10 years in the league. But they should keep him there for at least 1 year. Whether or not he finishes the entire year as a starting quarterback, to be honest, I don't know. But, they could at least keep him on the roster and let a rookie develop behind him a little bit. So then they're not throwing like a first, second round pick into the fire right away.
But what about his stock? Wouldn't you think they're kind of worried about that going down? If they can get picked for him?
To be honest, I think if they're going to be replacing him, there's not much else they could get for him besides like I think if they're going to trade him, it's probably similar in value to Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan. Maybe a little bit less. I mean, could be a 4th and 5th. The big issue here is he's not that great of a quarterback, and he's paid like he is. So that's where I'm kind of looking at it as an issue of, well, okay, you're going to trade him somewhere, but you got to dump his salary. And then also you're dumping him for a reason. And the reason you're dumping him is because he's probably not that good anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, he's never really been that great of a quarterback. You can look back on their 12-4 season where he was looking like an MVP candidate before he broke his leg. But really, I think it's come and gone for Derek Carr in Las Vegas or Oakland,
Yeah.
his entire time as a Raider. But I think that there probably is going to be a new coach there too this next offseason.
Really?
We don't know about Josh McDaniel's future. It's kind of just been a complete disaster to this point. I mean, along with the Nathaniel Hackett thing, I think it's possible that we have 2 or 3 coaches who are one and done after this year.
Okay.
But, it's just not looking that good for Josh McDaniels to stay there long term. Kind of thought maybe he'd be like the guy that they would look to find the future quarterback. But to be honest, to find the Raiders, I don't want him trying to find the future quarterback. I want him to keep his hands off of everything, and they can bring in somebody who is actually going to be a good head coach.
Definitely.
Now, being an offensive coordinator and a head coach are 2 different things. I think Josh McDaniels is a really good offensive coordinator, but I don't think he's that good of a head coach, and I think we've seen it now in Denver and in Las Vegas, so I don't really need to see any more from him.
So if you wanted to go for a second-round quarterback, I think they should go for Anthony Richardson. Now, before you say, like, oh, the offense isn't built that way, well, he's a project quarterback. Look at the Ravens.
I think that could actually work, though.
That's exactly how Lamar was viewed. Lamar was viewed as a project quarterback, and the offense wasn't built to run that way. So you just get the coach, and you build the offense that way.
If they get Anthony Richardson, they probably don't need to build up their offensive line as much because then he can run.
No.
Yeah.
Brandon,
No.
you're saying no. Why do you say no?
I'm saying no because the last 2 6'5" big strong quarterbacks that they've had, Jamarcus Russell and Terrell Pryor, have all not panned out.
Well,
that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it does mean stuff actually. Because I don't know Anthony Richardson personally, but Connor, like you said, you've seen the dirtiness, and I know he's gotten a little bit of crime troubles. I don't know exactly what it was. I can't remember, but I've seen reports on that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like Riley said, he's a project. I mean,
crime trouble. I mean, like he's a whiner.
No, like crime.
Legal troubles.
Yeah, no legal trouble.
Oh, well, there he fits right in with the Raiders.
I could see that actually be a thing though, just for that reason. No, in all seriousness though, I mean he's gonna be a project guy. I think that could potentially work, just because they don't necessarily need to be as good as of an offensive line. I mean, look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen is one of the greatest project quarterbacks to ever work out. You could be drafting Anthony Richardson, and he could be the next Josh Allen. I mean, eventually you got to find this next group of quarterbacks, the next generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen them quite yet. I mean, we got Herbert, we got Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen. Who else? There's not much. So, I mean, they need to find somebody. I was thinking maybe Bo Nix from Oregon. I think he might be a potential guy to fit there. Other than that, I can't really think of anybody else that would maybe be there when they're picking. But honestly, if they're in that position, they might trade up to get the 5th-year option in the first round.
You can count on Chris Ballard on drafting Anthony Richardson for the Colts.
Think they'll actually draft someone?
Definitely.
Or do you think they'll just stick with Ellinger?
If Sammy somehow goes on a hot streak, I mean, like I said, he played good, didn't play the best, somewhat because of the play calling. I don't know. We will see what happens. I just wish they would have done more with him. And okay, if you watch the game, he actually pretty much put him in a game-winning position. Michael Pittman just dropped the one pass that could have put him in field goal range to win the game. He did everything they needed to do. He didn't turn the ball over. He did everything he needed to do to win that game. Now, you could argue they were just playing Washington. I don't know.
I think we're going to have to continue this discussion again in the future because I really think that the whole, like, who needs to move on from their quarterbacks and everything could be a whole separate episode.
Definitely.
So maybe we can look at doing that at the end of this week, or we could do it next week, something like that. But I think that's pretty much it from us today. So happy trade deadline. Thanks to everybody for checking us out. And thank you for the continued support. And go ahead and like us on YouTube, subscribe, comment, share it with a friend. We're also on all those streaming services that you can find your podcasts. So until next time, see you later. And thanks for checking us out.